Hello and welcome to the James Xander Trip. My guest today is Ivonne Solther. I'm so excited to have you on the show. You are one of the students inside our Unlock God Mode community, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to bring you on the podcast. I have nothing prepared. This is going to be an off-the-cuff conversation about life, the universe, personal growth, what we're all here to do, and how your journey through life has informed you and helped you to understand life lessons. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds amazing. That's awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm actually super excited to be here. Same space, and also podcast, right? Which is how I got through your work and how we met, and we've been working together for a while now. And it's just very crazy to be now on the other side of the microphone. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about how you discovered my course, my work, and what actually brought you to Unlock God Mode and what has been the effect of it?
Yeah, of course. So, what was it? It's crazy that what brought me here was actually an injury. I am a little hyperactive, so I move a lot and I do a lot of things. And last year, maybe I overdid it, and I hurt my hip pretty badly. And it was months and months and months, and just like trying to recover. And I knew, like, I've been studying many things for a while, and I knew that I could heal my body with my mind. I just never tried it. I knew the theory. And when I was going through this injury, and doctors and whatnot, I kept on getting frustrated, actually, on knowing that there is something in the mind that we can activate in order for the body to do things. And I kept on researching and seeing, like, okay, I've met, the books of Joe Dispenza and lots of, like, connect your mind, body, whatever. And I couldn't, like, unlock it. And I guess the algorithm actually brought me to you. It was really crazy. And I never heard of Neville Goddard, for instance, ever. But I think I was just like researching so much and listening to things and trying to do the visualizations and meditations and whatnot, that eventually it was the algorithm. So good for you and whatever you use as tags. And the thing with that specifically was that something in his work, of course, through your work, spoke to me very directly, which was the simplicity of something that was so complex. In my case, was how do we actually activate this part of the mind that helps you command the body, right, at a cellular level so that you can heal. And he was just explaining, I don't know if it's your voice or what is it, but it was like your podcast. And I got hooked, right? I was just like, oh, wow, like I am understanding these things that I have intellectualized, but I am now understanding them in my body because the words are so simplified that they rehumanize that language into experience. And that, I was just like listening to that for a while, and I started doing a lot of the visualization exercises in there. And so the quick answer is, like, your podcast has a little ad. And that ad, eventually I was just like, okay, who's this guy? So let's see. And eventually I joined the course. You have a 30-day
course, unlockgodmode.org.
There we go. That's the ad, guy.
That's the ad. Get ready.
And that's the ad. So click on that because it's really cool. And when I did that, and this is where it gets really magical and really crazy, right? When I joined that course, I was also not only going through physical healing. I had just had a very hard year the previous year. And this year, I had already decided, like, this is it. This is the leap year. This is a year where now I feel great. Now I'm going to start doing things. And suddenly my body is like, no, no, there's more to look at and there's more to heal. So when I start doing this, there's an offer also in your course. And it's like, hey, come join a community of people, right? And I was like, cool. I've always... Not always, but I've been studying online for years and years. So for me, it's actually quite easy to just like join online stuff. I know for other people might not be, but it is a universe that it's worth experiencing. And investigating and like giving it a go, right? There's so much people from so many places with so many experiences and things to share. So for me, it's not that hard, but this one was different because the first God Mode circle that I joined, it was, I don't know if anyone relates to this type of experience where you walk into the wrong classroom. In my case, I was I thought I was joining like, I don't know, colors A, B, C, or red, whatever. And it turns out like the entire classroom was full of architects, and not even just like Da Vinci's and, like all sorts of incredible humans. So my first contact with this people, with the circle, with your people in there, I was just like, wow, like I'm so underqualified for this conversation. This is incredible. And I couldn't believe that I was actually hearing people from different ages and backgrounds and yeah, so many it was just like a very, very profound first experience, because everyone was already in tune with this work, right? With the world of manifestation and what I'm trying to do. And this world, the self-development work, for me is not very foreign. Like I've been doing this for years now. But to see it at a different level was what was for me like, wow, like I'm actually talking to people who are in the corporate world and people with lots of money and people with this background and people, entrepreneurs. And I've always kind of like felt it for a, different demography, right? And to me, that was really fascinating just to hear, like this type of work also at this level of, functioning in the, I don't know, I'm rambling. You say something.
I think that's what makes the community so special for me and for others is everyone who joins the God Mode Mastermind has gone through the Unlock God Mode course. Mm. And if they weren't in tune with that work, with the work of Neville, with the work of manifestation, consciousness, working on your mind, they would not join, or they would just disappear into the sunset, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
So the ones that stay, it's a really great core group of people that have decided consciously, I'm going to work on my mind, whether it's through the help of psychedelics or through the help of Neville's work or through the help of other techniques that I teach in the course or their own unique techniques. Let's go deeper. Let's go find out what is in our mind, change the underlying code, and see it reflected in the outside reality. And that's been super exciting to connect with people that understand that. There's no convincing that needs to happen. They're already on the same page.
Exactly. There's no convincing, right? So it also makes it so easy that when you come in there and you say something, someone's going to click with it. Someone's going to be like, yeah, like I know what you're talking about. Even if it doesn't make sense in the words that you're choosing, there's a feel to it that everyone kind of knows because they've had some sort of approach. And regardless of what method they've been using, they know that there's expansion happening and the potential of expansion, which is, it's amazing to see. Because also what you see in this community is the different levels of expansion that people have gone through. And to me, that's been one of just in my own journey in this community specifically, like I kind of like aligned with 3 other people at the same time, and we all started different projects that we had been thinking about and maybe marinating it for years and years. And then this space where everyone talks about their own expansion and how they see things, and listening to someone go through their process makes you make sense of whatever you're going through. So you like sink in and start doing things. And then there's also this awareness, I think, from people who have gone through further in their paths, that they have this awareness that this expansion belongs to everyone. So they're just like so willing to share, right? And to not only share what they did, but how they feel about it and how they think about it. So it becomes this really, really potent space to be like, oh, wow, like what we are learning, everyone's implementing in so many different areas of their lives. So it kind of like springboards you into like your own space.
Tell me where your personal growth journey began before Unlock God Mode, before the God Mode Mastermind. You've been doing this for years in your own way. And I'm curious, was there a point in your life that sparked an interest in self-development for you and propelled you into this way of being?
Yes, there must have. I think for me, it's been just so many things from a very early age. And for one thing, I feel like super lucky. Like I think I did reincarnate in a time and space and a family system and a friend system that constantly gives me a lot of experiences, I guess. I have a very united family, right? And everyone's like very in service to everyone, like from my dad to my grandparents, my mom. So there was also like this, there was always, this connection to service. And I think, and regardless of what, like maybe, I don't know if charity specifically, but say my dad was a very active person in like helping others do things, or my grandparents. And I think for me, that brought me down to the idea of, there's a lot that what we have, there's a lot into what we have to offer that when you give, it gives you back. I don't know if I've ever gotten that message very explicitly told to me, but that's how I felt it, right? And from a very early age, I felt like, wow, like I've been given so much, like just like by life, right? That I feel like I have to give it back, and not in a heavy way, but like it recycles, right? Like it flows.
Your cup is overflowing. Yeah,
it's overflowing, and you receive, and it's not for you to keep, it's for you to share, right? And the more you share, the more you receive. The more you share, the more you receive. And it's just crazy because it happens with information. It happens with beauty. It happens with experiences. It happens with money I'm learning. It happens with love. It happens with so many things. And I've always also been very sensitive to like what happens around. Like I feel things very deeply, like very, very deeply. So when something is going well with someone else, I feel it. But when something's going really like heavy, I remember having like existential crisis when I was like 6, maybe, just thinking about conflict in the world, right? And just having to talk to my mom or my dad, and like a little, how do you explain war to a kid, right? So I guess I was kind of a challenging child, perhaps. But that sensibility kind of like made me aware of like, it does matter. It does matter. Like what you do or what I do or what I get told or what I say matters a lot in someone else's experience, because what I'm receiving matters a lot in my own experience. And that came to me very early on in the sense of like, oh, wow, we do matter.
What I do matters. It sounds simplistic, but when you really sit with it, everything you do creates a ripple in other people's lives.
Yeah.
So be careful which ripples you create.
100%. Yeah. Be careful and be responsible.
Be responsible and step into your leadership. Like, that's what I've been feeling the last couple of years is once you are aware of that, you must step up to the task.
Oh, I love that.
Of creating positive ripples.
Yeah.
You can no longer just sit back and say, well, someone else has gotten that taken care of.
Right.
If you have the urge, the inspiration to teach something, to be of service in some way, follow that inspiration.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much because it's true, right? Like there's this I think with awareness comes responsibility, right? Like you can be just oblivious of many things, and that's okay. If you are, that's okay.
But once you're aware,
the
universe ain't playing.
You're like, because you can't unsee it. It's like when you learn how to read, you're done. Like there's no word that you won't be able to read, at least in your language. So I love what you're saying. You gotta step up because it's also like a calling constantly, right? And I don't know that you have to be a very specific type of leader. I do think though that when you have this in you, this type of leadership, there's something calling you to actually do something about it, be it online, be it with your kids, be it with whoever. But there's always going to be, you're going to become the vessel for this.
The instrument that
The
God
instrument.
is playing.
And people will be coming to you for that specific thing that you do. I think for me, that's been one of the biggest, maybe, lessons. And I'm still trying to make sense of it. But understanding and owning that if you're good for something, it's not for free. If you're good at something, not for something, sorry, it is not for free. You put it at the service of things, right? And then you become better. So that's like maybe your retribution, but it is for you to use. It is for you to serve. It is for you to expand on and to maybe teach or to help and to assist and to whatever. And there's that, right? If you're good with your voice, use it. You know, it's been given to you. If you're good listening, use it. If you're good walking, if you're whatever, right? And we were talking just earlier today about like how diverse life can be in like the many coats that you can wear. And I think that's okay too. Like if you're excellent at making coffee, making whatever, use it, right? Because it's been given to you. And you don't know how much you can have an impact on someone by being the best at what you're doing. And that to me is just fascinating, right? It's like, oh wow, if I'm really good at this, I might actually be super good for someone.
Mm-hmm. We've all been given unique gifts. One of the questions actually this morning, we did a God Mode Mastermind call, and the question was, what is your unique gift to the world, and how can you use it more? How can you show up more with it? And for those listening that maybe have not had the awareness of what their gifts are, ask your friends, ask the people that know you. What do you see in me that I'm good at? Where do you see that I can be of service? Where I'm really good at supporting you in some way? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then you can use those gifts. If you don't use them, I found this out the hard way. If you don't use your gifts, they will be taken from you and given to someone else. And this applies to money as well. When you receive money, it doesn't matter which channel it comes from, it's still the universe giving you money through that person or through that circumstance. If you just hoard it, the universe is not going to reward that. It's going to find a way to disappear from your life. But if you invest it in yourself, invested in your education, invested in your business, invested in your gifts, that's good. Now you're keeping the flow going, and there's just more and more positive ripples being created. And that applies to money. I think it applies to friendships, relationships. Not that you should use relationships, but if you are not making the most of yourself and giving the most of yourself from the heart, from pure intention, you're becoming stagnant. And the universe is just going to kick you down a notch or teach you a humble lesson.
Yeah, humbling lessons, right? And that is, you said something that I 100% agree with, and it's investment, right? Like regardless of what you need to invest in, and it doesn't only need to be money, and it can be money.
Money, time, energy, love, passion,
yes,
excitement. There's so many things you can invest.
Yeah, and the thing is, the more you invest, I don't know who, I just read this recently, but it was see everything as an investment and not as a waste, I think. Who said that? Or as a expenditure, something like that. Because when you spend, you're losing, but when you invest, you are getting back, right? And I love that perspective because it was like, oh yeah, so I'm choosing to invest my time with a friend having coffee right now. I'm choosing to invest this time for self-recovery or this course that I'm paying for or this, I don't know, whatever you are. But the thing is, you are getting back. You know, you're giving that energy and you're allowing it to come back to you, including conversation. But when you're wasting your time, you know, when you're just like not using it, you do get those lessons eventually, right? Like either the universe does tone down like how much you get of that, but I don't think it so yeah, let me just feel this out, because I don't think you get toned down so that it gets taken away from you. I think it's a way of life to tell you, hey, this is gonna get very uncomfortable until you realize. And the thing is, we're so resilient as humans, right? Like we can be so uncomfortable for so long, and it's not until like we're very, very uncomfortable that the what's this thing that you
The dial, the volume knob.
Yes, the dial keeps going down, that you're like, hey, like I have this, that it's so loud within. I think that the lowest it goes outside, the loudest it gets within. And then you get so uncomfortable that you have to do something about it. And usually that's when you have like your breakthrough points, right? Like when you're like, okay, I got to do something about this. And if we just learn, if we just learned how to listen sooner, we wouldn't need to wait for the crisis, right? Or for the smack in the face by life, or for the breakup, for the whatever. Because we do have a voice constantly telling us where
Absolutely.
we should be looking at.
Absolutely. Oprah said it very well once. She said, it starts as a whisper, and then it turns into a little bit louder, and then a little bit louder. And if you still don't pay attention, then the catastrophe happens.
Mm-hmm.
But if you listen to the whisper and you take action on it, then the catastrophe never has to happen.
Yeah. And it's same, right? Like you the voice is the same inside. Like it's calling you to where, also it's not to where you have to be only by mandate. It's to where you want to be. Like if you really tune into the things
it's your
that you
higher
love,
self.
Yeah.
Telling you already what you want, right? So it's never a mandate. It's never a, you must do this thing that you don't like to do with your life.
Which is crazy, because if we think about it, a lot of us who have like, our, life to life, a lot of our time does go into this, you have to do this thing in order to blah, blah, blah. So we're actually counter existing in what we should be tuning, like what we should be experiencing, which is what your voice is telling you all the time. And the easy way to tune into that is just like, what do I love doing? Like, where do I feel super lit up? Like how do I find, and this is a lot of what I tell my participants from my own community, like when we're like, how do I find my calling, or how do I find the thing that I want to be doing, or whatever. It's just like, what do you love doing? Who do you love spending time with? How do you feel at your best? Like, what makes you smile when you're speaking or when you're thinking about it? Just like knowing that your body will speak for you.
Yeah.
You light up, right?
And what are you compelled to do?
Exactly.
Like when I started creating content around Neville, for example, I started a Twitter account called Neville Daily, and it posts Neville quotes. And I was like, this is bringing no extra income. It's a distraction from my other priorities. And yet I'm compelled to do this. I can't help but spread Neville's work far and wide. And now it makes sense why I started doing that, because it brought a whole new audience to my work.
Right.
Now I can share my course on this page, and it's like exactly aligned with the Neville audience. But in the beginning, I was like, why am I spending so much time on Neville Goddard? But it was just this impulse. And Bashar says it really well. He says, follow your highest excitement in every moment, taking it as far as you can with no expectation of the outcome, no insistence on the outcome. That's the sweet spot of, you feel the excitement, you feel the impulse, you don't even know why you're doing it, but you know you're being lit up when you do it.
Yeah.
And when you take that as far as you can until you can take it no further and the excitement dies out, that's the perfect spot to just take it that far and then see what happens. See what magic shows up. See what synchronicities show up.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful, because also you can, like, based on this, you can trust that by virtue of you doing what you love doing, you will be sustained. And I think a lot of us fear that we won't, right? We fear that if we go that route of doing what you love and your passion and whatever, we might not be, safe, right? Or have the financial means or love or appreciation or acceptance or whatnot. And if we do follow, we will constantly find that things line up, that things just like self-sustain. Because, I mean, why would we be excellent at something, or why would we be called to or feel so good about something if we weren't meant to be doing it? And there's this trust, right? I do think there's this layer of maybe social preconception or conditioning or whatnot that we need to breathe and let go for a little bit and remind ourselves that if there's something within that it's constantly calling, because it's a constant, right? The voice, it's a constant. And if it's constantly there, then we can lean in and trust a little bit that it will figure itself out, like your Twitter channel.
Absolutely.
It made no sense, but now it makes sense.
It makes all the sense.
It makes all the sense because it kind of like has your back, right? And there's this energy too, and like when you do something you love, the expectation that you have for yourself. Of course, you can be, perfectionist and whatnot, but if you're doing it because you love it, the love of it itself kind of like feeds back.
It fuels you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's the best work you can do, is work that fuels you.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up more energized after doing it. Like this conversation is energizing, yes.
Yeah.
Me studying Neville's mystical works energizes me.
Right.
And it's fantastic when you can find that. The one thing I wanted to add was when you follow what you love, it may take longer than we think to make it profitable income-wise. And that's, I think, a trap that people sometimes fall into, is they want to make it work in the first month or the first 3 months. And sometimes these things, for them to grow from a seed to a full-fledged tree, it could take 2 years. But those 2 years are going to pass anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you may as well work on your craft, work on getting as good as you can at your skill set, at what lights you up for those 2-3 years, maybe 5 years. You will break through at some point. You'll figure something out. The right people will come into your life, the right opportunities, but you'll be prepared for that opportunity as well.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I love time. Time is great. Because it's such a excellent container. Time is fascinating, right?
Talk to me about time, because you have an interesting relationship with time.
I have a really interesting relationship with time, and it might be a little bit peculiar, and maybe there's not like a lot of words in this word to it. I don't know. The thing is, as I see time, is just as something so malleable that we can't manipulate it, but we can manipulate how we exist during time, if that makes sense.
We can stretch it.
We can stretch how we move in it. I don't know that we can actually move time. I don't know. Like it might get a little visual. But the thing is, time is going to pass regardless of us wanting time to pass or not. But how we choose to experience time changes time, or changes our transit in time. And this, just bear with me for a little bit. Say, okay, this might be crazy to think, but this is how I see time. I was born at one moment and I will die at another time. So there's a line in there. And what I do between then and now, it's how I use time, right? So I can choose to be present in this moment in the emotion that I am thinking. So say if I'm going to have to wait for 3 years for my seed to sprout, in my project, I'm going to have to wait 3 years. It's just like for any fruit or for anything to actually sprout, you have to have that time passing, yes or yes. But I can be angry looking at the tree and thinking about like, why are you not growing? Like, come on, get here fast. Or looking at your phone, like, why is the text not here or whatever? Or I can be also using this energy in the time to either study the other thing or just like experience like, okay, waiting time is actually really good because it allows me to understand the process of whatever. Or so that's the thing. Like when you choose to experience time as whatever you choose to experience it, then you actually have a say in what every single second is doing to your life. So for me, when this started was when I started hearing a lot in my family narrative, like, oh, time goes so fast, and this ended so fast, and everything just like it's done and whatever. I was like, I don't want to miss out on life. Like what? No, I like life. Like I want to experience every second of it, and I chose that. And I was like, okay, what if actually I did experience every second of life? What if I can actually choose to be present in all of my seconds? And of course, I don't have this mastery, but I do have this ability maybe to say, instead of being like, oh, and it's only words sometimes. Like sometimes it can be as easy as being, oh, we only have 3 minutes left versus, wow, we still have 3 minutes left.
Right.
This for me has changed everything in how I exist, because I can choose to have, wow, I still have 3 minutes. Like I get, how many seconds is 3 minutes? So many minutes, but let's say a minute because it's easier. So I still have all of these 60 seconds. I get 60 of these units versus I only get, and the same with money, right? I still have $1,000 versus I only have $1,000. So it's this perception, and perception is actually how I feel it. It's the only thing that we have ownership on, or some sort of like influence over. And time is just amazing, because then if this project is going to take 3 times to actually do something about it, it is happening while something else is happening.
And are you enjoying the something else that's happening?
Exactly.
Or are you just waiting for the thing to happen?
Because you can also choose to suffer through this moment, right? And of course, we could expand on, there's the different experiences that aren't as enjoyable or whatnot. And for that, like, even though I can't speak for every single experience in the world, and I know there's dense stuff going on, there's also this thing, which is the same line, it will pass. Like, everything passes, right? Everything starts and everything ends. And how we experience that can be as intense and as long as we allow our minds to do it, right? The same time with the people we love is precious, right? And we can be counting down the seconds that we have with them left, or we can be with them present in every single second and just like using this time, absorbing it, like being fully in there, because then we know what life, God, universe, whatever is offering, we are fully receiving, and then we get to give it back. Like the presence of someone when they're with you, you can feel completely different than when we're just like, hey, let's grab a quick coffee, bye-bye, and then there's the phone and time, and I have to be here at whatever. So what this perception has done for me, and you can talk to my friends and ask them, like, I have so many lifetimes in a day. It's crazy. And you asked me recently, like, how do you manage to do all the things that I do? I don't often feel pressured. Maybe I get overwhelmed with some stuff, but not all the time. But I often feel like, wow, like I had so many lives today. And it was just the choice, now unconscious, but the choice to be fully present in what you're doing. And then suddenly you already had like 17 different days, and you created so many things, and you rested, and you had coffee with a friend, and you
recorded a podcast. Reminds me of Ed Milet. He said he has 3 days in each day. So from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m., he counts that as one day. 12 p.m. to 6 p.m., another day. 6 p.m. to midnight, another day. And just creating that shift in his mind, because we've been conditioned. Time is an illusion, let's face it. And we've been conditioned to see it as one day, one night, one day, one night. And he said, well, I don't have to do that. I can see it 3 days, one night. And then it completely changes the paradigm of how you relate to time.
Yeah, and to your own relationship with relationships, around like your colleagues, your friends, your partner, your whoever, right? Like the time you spend with them, and this might be challenging for some, but the time you spend, like, it can be actually the best time, and it can be perceived as very scarce, or it can be like the fullest. Like it's the presence that I've had. It's like you can be split in so many versions of you that you are experiencing throughout the day, because there's no limit. The only limit is your mind and how you see time. Like a commute alone can be precious time, because you're moving physically, you're moving from place to place, but mentally, where are you? Emotionally, where are you? And what are you doing with that? And are you allowing things to come or things to rest? Or it's pretty fascinating when you just like choose what to do with the seconds that you're given. Totally. Or whatever time measurement you use, right?
I love being on an airplane flight going somewhere, and it feels like the simulation is loading a new geography underneath you. You're up in the clouds, and you're having a 30,000 foot view of your life. So it's like you're physically in the air up above, but also mentally, you get to, there's no Wi-Fi, you're offline, no one can reach you. you're sitting in the dark cabin, they turn off the lights, and you're just by yourself thinking about life. And I find that time so valuable. I get so many great insights, so many downloads. Sometimes I just want to fly for that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's something that I started doing like a few years ago when flying specifically was like, what can I choose to do in this time? Like I can, because I cannot sit for too long.
I can read, I can think, I can meditate.
You can watch a movie if you want, or you can use your solo time. Because when do you get that? Right? Or you can take a pen and a napkin or your notebook or whatever and write. Or you can observe people, right? Just like watching people do their things and be like, there's so many of us. Like you get to see sometimes like this beautiful interactions between mom and baby, you know, there, or the person who's actually working in a plane and walking, you know, there's so much to learn when you just allow yourself to observe and not be constantly entertained by the screen or by, you know, content that is just injecting more
dopamine.
Yeah, in your brain. And you're like, what if I just allow myself to experience what I'm doing? What if I, instead of being like, oh man, this is a 10-hour flight, it's like, wow, I get 10 hours to
myself.
And yeah, it might be tight, but what happens when I'm tight? You know, like what start this dialogue internal, like, okay, like I can't really move, but I'm actually moving a lot. It's also, you know, like I'm moving kilometers at a time. It's crazy. And the mind can become a very, very interesting place when we allow it to have its own noise. And then once it gets loud enough, it calms down. And then you start seeing and thinking clearly.
Yes.
Rather than consuming, then sleeping, waking up, and now the music, and now the this, and now whatever.
Just observing. Feeling.
Just observing.
No judgments.
Or all the judgments and then they quiet down.
Or all the judgments and then they quiet down. I like that. Yeah. Being at peace with whatever comes up in your internal landscape. What's been one of the biggest lessons you've learned in your life, in your personal growth journey, that you'd like to pass on to the listener?
I think I have two, actually. One of them is that everything builds up on top of the previous thing. Like we everything that you go through and everything that you experience and everything that you learn, you see, you eat, you whatever, comes with you later, and it's there to build you up. So it doesn't really matter what you do. And if you are afraid of like changing paths or career, like you have all of that knowledge with you already. It comes with you. And that for me is amazing. And I'm just like so grateful to have had so many thus far, right? So many versions of lives.
You've moved around a lot. You've changed locations a lot of times.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this, that you don't start from scratch every time. You actually build upon the experience from before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's amazing if we all realize, like, it doesn't matter if you've been here for 17 years. In those 17 years, you learned things, you did things, like you became very conscious of your environment. You learned how to even cross the street, or that is now a ability that you have, right? And it will help you and serve you for something else. So say if you were a dentist and now you want to be a graphic designer or whatever, what you know of that will come with you. And that information you can use later. Now it's yours to use and to put at service, right? And so for me, that's one of the biggest lessons. Also having had like a very uncommon life, right? A life career specifically, like learning here and there and just being interested in so many diverse things that have nothing to do maybe with one another. Turns out they do. They all interconnect.
The dots connect looking backwards.
The dots connect. It's amazing. And the other one is very related, and it's that we can learn from absolutely everyone.
Yes, 100%.
Everyone. Like whatever interaction you have with whomever, there's
gold in there for you specifically.
So much gold.
If someone crosses your path, it's there for you. If something happens in your life, tragedy or happiness, it's there for you. And there's something that you don't need to extract it, but it's nice if you extract the lesson from it. Otherwise it'll repeat. I love this quote from Florence Scovel Shinn. You might resonate with this. No man is your friend. No man is your enemy. Every man is your teacher.
Ooh, that's amazing. I love
Every
it.
time I run into someone who might be getting on my nerves a little bit, no man is your friend. No man is your enemy. Every man is your teacher.
Yeah.
What can I learn from this person?
And it humbles you too, right? And it humbles everyone because it's just like no one's, or hopefully, I don't believe that there's evil people out there. And if there are, there's so few. I think we're all acting from what we know. And the more that we self-develop or the more that we become aware, which is why I love this work also, it's just like if we all knew that there is actually a more peaceful way to relate to one another, we would be hurting others less and being hurt less. However, whoever has hurt you, potentially they didn't do it because they were horrible. They did it out of whatever tools they had available, right? And with that, it's also like rehumbling you and like learning whatever's happening right now in this interaction. There's something here that I don't know that I'm here to learn and that I can get from it. And it's maybe a hard lesson, maybe a hard pill to swallow, right? But I can actually, if I choose to, I can learn something from this. And then if I choose to also, because it's a choice, then I implement it later so that I don't repeat this one mistake because we will mess up later. But there's that. There's a lesson in every single interaction. And the same goes to us. Like we all have something to teach someone else.
Yes.
Everyone has, right? So it is this cycle, this circle. Like it's not only for your own benefit, you're also benefiting someone else. And that gives you back the responsibility because it does matter. What you do matters. The words you choose matter. The
How
way
you show up.
How you show up, right? And the one word, and when you talk to people, and especially when you dive into the world of trauma and all that, there's usually the one word that someone said when you were, I don't know, 11, 10, 20, whatever. That one word might have changed the course of how you perceive things because, again, it's self-perception. And then there's maybe another word that someone said that changed you. And you were like, thank you for that thing you did that day at the cafeteria changed the way I related to, I don't know, my own perception of body, money, whatever. So yeah, it's that. Like we are fitting into life and life is fitting into us.
Oftentimes, it just takes one person who believes in us and states that out loud for us to go, oh, okay,
Yeah.
maybe that is true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always think to myself, who can I express that to? That I believe in you.
I love that.
Believe in your success. Because they might not have heard that their entire life.
Yeah.
It has to be genuine, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel something, some belief for your friends, for your relationships, express that, you know?
Yeah. You're very good at that, by the way, like in the community you have, which is, it's so potent. And I think it's because of that essence that it's got, that it's so genuine. And just like the way that you reflect things back at people, very unique to the person, it also fits into this group thing that now we do in the community, right? In the God Mode community, because now everyone's just like open to being like, I can be genuine about how I feel about what they just said and what I see on this other person. And you see it, the more calls that we have, you can start feeling how the interactions, the communication between the individual participants has developed to this place that I think you fostered very beautifully, just like reflecting back from a very genuine, and not only genuine, but also open to seeing what the person is bringing. And then you like shine it back and be like, hey, look at that. So people started doing that in the community recently, I mean, months ago, and everyone brought it with them, but you made it like the common way in which we relate to one another in there. And that's amazing.
That's beautiful to hear. Thank you for reflecting that.
Thank you.
Where shall we go next?
Where should we go next?
Tell me, what was the deepest lesson you learned from your time in India?
Okay, so I worked and lived in India for Not as long as I would have wanted to. But yeah, currently live in Canada. Back then I was living in Canada, and there was some, well, the calling, of course, right? I've been on enough personal work for
Call to adventure.
Exactly, to adventure. And I'm a very active person, so also mountains call to me and whatnot. And I found this this job that really called to me, which had to do with education and movements and adventure and learning and being with different communities and speaking, which is something I like doing apparently. So I moved there and I worked there, and the biggest lesson I had there, other than India is fascinating and everyone should go there.
What struck you about India when you first landed there?
It's just so big and vast, right? It's just, I know it might be perceived as chaotic or whatever, and maybe because I'm from Mexico, like I have like a bigger threshold, but it's so beautiful and it's so alive and it's so different. Also, like you go to a different state and it's a complete different world. Like one state does not reflect the other one. It's just fascinating. And something that struck me quite a bit was it's very different from the Western, like upper Western world where interactions are more like, arm's length. And here's like all it's very close together. There's a lot of people too, but also, like we're very, Latinos, we're very physical. Like we like touching people and hugging and whatnot. But in India it's different. They like staring. So it's just like, whoa, like eye contact is a thing. It's a real thing. And at the beginning it's uncomfortable, but then you start understanding like something from like eye to eye, literally from eye to eye. You start seeing that you're being seen in a way. And there's this curiosity that happens. There's this, like facing the other person, which to me was so important. Just like, oh, I'm actually looking at the person that's interacting with me rather than just being a extra spawned character in my video game. Like, oh yeah, the guy with the tortillas. Okay, here we go. You're gone. There's no tortillas in India, but what do we have there? I don't know.
Samosas.
Yeah, thank you. Samosa. Chai, right? It's not just the chai guy. It's the person, right? It's this guy whose name is this, and they're looking back at you. And if you dare, and for me that was like the lesson, right? Like I was like, because I was doing negotiations with people, and so like as a woman, not from there, it was kind of I think it was reverse shocking for everyone. People were like, what? Why are you doing this? But anyway.
So what did you notice in their eye contact that's different from the way Western people look at each other?
There's interest. There's actual, like I am looking into you and I'm
perceiving all of you.
I'm
judging you perhaps in a sense.
Perhaps, potentially, yes. But there's this at least upfront judgment, right? They are looking into you, trying to understand who you are. Where do you come from? Like, why do you look the way you look? But it's very genuine. Like it's non-blinking. If someone has been there, they don't. You often find that people would stare at you for a while. And what I found so beautiful, like after the, of course, intimidation part, I was like, oh my God, like they're staring at me. Where do you look? And then there's 1,000 eyes looking at you. It's this part of like, oh no, they are actually trying to figure you out, right? And then you look back and there's this, if you lock eyes with someone, it usually is just like there's an inner conversation that's going on in there energetically that you don't need words. Like you are telling each other things, yes or yes, and there's something. But if you connect to that, then you start feeling it elsewhere, right? Like you start feeling maybe your there's a vibration in your body, or your heart's racing, or your brain's doing things, but you don't have the words because that is the other language that we don't use to communicate. We're so reliant on words, but words don't have as much power as whatever our energies are speaking to one another. And the eyes, when you make that content and you actually there to stare back, there is a lot going on in there. And maybe one day we'll translate it into human words. But that's for me something that was fascinating about being there. Because like, wow, like people are actually looking at me, very different from my experience in other countries, where often that experience is, oh, I don't belong here, right? For a while, regardless of how many decades you've been in that space. And I can now connect that for myself, that I was looked, in the eye there, like actually, versus in other places where you can be overlooked. Or, so that was an interesting experience.
I always find it interesting how we've been conditioned not to look directly at each other. Kids do it naturally. They will look wherever they want to look.
Don't stare.
Exactly. We teach them to not stare when it's the most natural thing in the world to look and perceive someone as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's convenient for certain people that we've been taught to not really look at the world as it is, but to trust more in the words or the language rather than the raw data.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the way the system works would not work if people actually perceived truth as it is, and we're not conditioned by so many layers.
Yeah, and truth comes from within, right? Like we know it. When we know.
Yes.
Like when you know. And that's potent. And that doesn't come in words. It usually comes in feeling, right?
And this is maybe Neville Goddard's greatest lesson. Get the feeling of knowing.
Right. Yeah.
When you know something's going to happen, that's it. It's going to happen. Have you ever had that moment in life where you're in a random place at a random time and you have a knowing? You're like, oh, in a couple months, I'm probably going to be this. Or this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it does. And I go back in my memories and I look at that moment. I'm like, wow, there was nothing special about the external place. But just in that moment, something came in. And it's just, I know this is going to happen.
And it's like a decision, right? Like something got decided there and then. And you're like, oh,
yeah.
Well, this is it. Now I just trust that it's going to happen. How it's going to happen, which is also a Neville thing. Like you don't need to worry about the how, because now it's decided. You just trust that it is. And it happens. And I'm certain we all have those moments, even if it's tiny, right? In high school or primary school, whatever, when you're like, oh, I'm going to do that. It's already been decided. And I just need to remember that it's been decided because it's going to happen anyway. I wanted to go back to something in the eyes. And that reminded me of something we spoke before. When I was maybe, I don't know, back in my teenage years, I worked in hospitals for a while as a clown doctor. And the experience that I wanted to tell you that you asked me about relates to this looking at the eyes. And I was actually going to tell you something different, and this just came to me. But there was, as clown doctors, we visited kids, right? Or patients, mainly kids. The very first time I went into my first visit as a clown doctor, it was, of course, really shocking because you're visiting kids in this state, like the most vulnerable, lowest state that you can be in is sick, yes, but when you're a kid, you're down there. So part of your training as a clown doctor is to be below that, like be way more vulnerable so that you are at their service, right? And
oh, wow.
It doesn't mean that they have to, like you won't get abused by the kids, but it's like letting them know that they have some sort of status and that they still get a say.
They matter.
And they can ask for things and they can be seen and they can, you give them a little bit more power back in a way. And of course, this is through game and this is through play and this is through jokes and this is through a lot of things. But a lot of it is through silence, because this is hospitals. This is not a circus, right? This is, you still got to be quiet.
Absolutely.
And something happened to me in my very first visit, which is crazy that all of these things synchronized. The boy his name was Javier. That's my dad's name also. And it was a burnt children hospital. So of course the visuals were crazy intense. And it was the very first kid that I ever visited. And the thing was, he didn't really have a lot of his body left. And the only way in which we were able to communicate was through the eyes. And I remember when I first saw him, I was like, like this shock. And then immediately saw his eyes and something clicked there. And I was just like, wait, he's not his injuries. He's there. His eyes are there. And I didn't know this like mentally. I knew it emotionally maybe, or energetically or whatever. And that got me through the impulse to like run away and rethink about my choices. But it was the soul maybe connection, eye to eye. And after this, like, I don't know, it felt like years of like staring back at each other's eyes, but it must have been 2 seconds. After that, I was just like, all right, he's in there. I'm in here, because also I'm wearing like a freaking clown nose and, like I'm all covered in things. I'm also not there, but inside I am. And he saw that. And I saw that. So from there, this interaction started of just like playing. I think he didn't have arms. So what we started doing was this little game on like high-fiving, but with his feet. And just like laughing, and he also couldn't laugh a lot, but he was laughing with his eyes. So I wasn't speaking also. I was just like doing things with my eyes and just like, and for me, that was one of the lessons where I'm like, there's something inside of us that is speaking to us all the time. And it doesn't need voice. It doesn't need words. It doesn't need even body. It just needs to be looked at and recognized by the other frequency that matches. And then we can communicate. And for me, that was one of the very, very first impactful lessons where I was like, there's something to learn from everyone. Because this little kid, Javier, taught me in that moment, there's so much that he needs to say. He can speak it, but I can understand. And he knows that I understand because he's looking back at me. And from there, I was just like, there's gold here, right? And it brings you back down to humbleness and being like, I have so much to learn. And then once I learn it, I can give it back, and then I can receive more, and then I can give back. And yeah, no words needed.
Wow. No words needed. Exactly. Where in your life are you growing now? Where do you feel the expansion happening for you?
So in many areas, right? And thank you for that. So James is my coach, and currently he's got me doing so many. Like you've been pushing me out of my own paradigms, right? And a lot of what I've been growing on right now is just like self-perception, because there's also something that maybe it's cultural, maybe it's society, maybe it's whatever, but there's something that we don't want to acknowledge, the fact that we can be ever expanding and ever growing. And that relationship can be to self, to your body, to money. In my case right now, it's my relationship to money, right? Like this energy that sometimes feels like dirty, right? Like you cannot be at service if you're also making money, right? So you have to keep this job here that is what is expected of you. And if you're going to give back, then that should be charity, that should be, for free. And so for me, where the expansion has been happening, and I'm so grateful for you for that also, it's understanding that no, this is also energy, right? Like I need to be, just as much as I'm saying I love receiving information and I can give it back, the same is with that. If I am able to understand that abundance, financial abundance, also is the way in which I will be giving financial abundance to my project, the people that I work with, the projects that I believe in, the causes and all of that, I need to unlock that. And right now for me, this is the step that I'm taking. Just like, what if I actually acknowledge the fact that I am also worthy of receiving all of this, so that I can direct more of it, so that I can put it at the service. And yeah, for me, that's been like huge one this year, huge one.
Can you talk about some of the lessons you've learned around money and how your perceptions have been changing around it, and what you could impart to the listener?
Yeah. So friend or foe, right? That's one big lesson. A big one, right? Because I think up till like very recently, and I'm saying maybe a couple of months ago, not even too long, money felt heavy, right? It felt like, I need to make more so that I can pay the freaking bill. And oh my God, like this is what? $17 or whatever it is. And that heaviness and that weight, it's very interesting once you start looking at it. It's like, why am I carrying this weight? Like when it could be like, wow, like this is actually the investment, right? Like an exercise that I've been doing for a few months now is looking at my statement when it comes. And I don't do this, oh God, I have to pay all of this money. How much? I go item by item and remember what I used that money for, regardless of what it was. Toilet paper, if you want, taxi, coffee, or whatever. And I just relive that moment. And I thank that charge because I was able to have this coffee here. I was able to take a cab home. I was able to pay for my internet. I was able to pay for the medicine when I wasn't feeling good. So it's now a gratitude thing. And it's changed so much because now what I receive, it's kind of like doing the same thing I do with time, where I'm like, oh, I get to choose if it's a lot of money or if it's very little. So what has been changing is that now it feels like everything that comes to me so much. And honestly, James, I don't think that I'm getting way more money than I was before if I see the numbers. However, it's doing way more than it was doing before. How? I don't know. The same way my days are like a week long.
Amazing. Amazing. Same amount of money, but it's doing way more than before. It's doing
so much more. It's crazy.
But you touch on something so important, the appreciation aspect. I like to think of money as a relationship. The spirit of money. What is your relationship to that? If you were in a relationship with a human and your thoughts about them was, they're dirty, they feel heavy to me.
Yeah.
They would perceive that and they would not want to be around you. Versus having a gratitude relationship, appreciation relationship, light, fun, playful, trusting, knowing that they're always going to show up when they need to, when you need them. That's a whole different vibration. And so I really encourage to anyone listening, when it comes to money, ask yourself, what is my relationship to money? Imagine it's a human. And how have you been treating this human? I remember one person I met, she would go on a date with money.
Oh, wow.
So Wednesdays, she would book dinner at some restaurant just with herself.
That's awesome.
And she would pretend that money is sitting across from her. And she would just vibe with money. Like, how is our relationship? And I thought that was fantastic.
That's amazing. I love that.
And then something I learned from Robert Scheinfeld from Busting Loose from the Money Game is requests for appreciation. I think that's what he calls it. So start to see, instead of a bill or an invoice, it's a request for appreciation.
Right.
And likewise, when you receive money, that's you receiving appreciation for your services. And I love that framework, that way of looking at things.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. It is appreciation, right? And it starts feeling different. And I think, and it's also really hard to do, I think, until we decide it's not as hard. But we do have like collectively decided that it's really hard to get money and that it's really hard to keep it. And then just like working my relationship with money, because I've been, like I've been just like resisting charging for my services or thinking that, you can expand or let go or whatever. Do we have to keep it? That was a question that I asked myself. Like, because the idea was it's really hard to keep. And I'm like, well, if it's hard to keep, it's maybe because we're not meant to keep it. Maybe we're just meant to allow it to flow. Like a bird, right? Like we're not we're not supposed to cage them. Like we can, but they're going to be miserable. And then the bird's not going to like you. And when I started looking at it that way, I was just like, okay, if I allow it to come and go, maybe it'll come back. That thing in relationship, when if they're yours, they'll come back or whatever. I started doing the same thing with money. Maybe we're not meant to keep it. And I mean it in the sense of like hoard it, right? And like think of it, like count every single cent and be like, oh no, like if I let go of this 1 cent, then I will never make it back. It's like, no, what if actually you do? What
and
if
trust in yourself as the director of your life,
Exactly.
the creator, that you can create more money.
Yeah, because there's so much. That's the other thing, right? Like there is so much money. Because if there weren't, we wouldn't have this disparities in society, right? We wouldn't have billionaires. There's so much money. It's just we need to gain access to it, and but the access maybe comes from how we perceive it, right? Maybe comes from how we spend it. And I'm not saying be responsible with your expenditures or whatnot, but look at it in a way that how is it serving you in a non-heavy way? Like you said, the relationship with it, right? It changes so much. And just like listening to my circles talk about money, it's a good exercise to do in a reflection of how you talk about money. And then when you start listening to those uncomfortable conversations, and you're like, oh, maybe I also speak of money this way, right? And what would I like to be hearing right now from this circle? And if it's not happening, potentially I'm also not participating in that way either. So, which is why also your community, like God Mode community, when we start talking about these things, and then there's people who are just like very abundantly talking about abundance, you're like, oh, maybe I'm not in the wrong classroom after all. Like this is great. Yeah.
We have a millionaire in our mastermind. At least
Amazing.
I think we have more than one actually. But the one I'm thinking of, he says, oh, I don't think about money.
Yeah.
And it keeps coming to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a breath of fresh air. And you could be cynical about it if you're at a certain frequency. But the way I see it is like, wow, what an inspiration.
100%. And this person, if we're thinking about the same person, he is so abundant in his entire essence, because a lot of what he does in our masterminds is he just wants to share how to be at peace with it, and how to make more, and how to, like, he often offers like, hey, I heard what you're saying. If you want to have a one-on-one, like, I'm happy to help. And he's so open about it, and like,
so giving, so generous.
And now, like, trying to understand money as energy, you go figure why he's a millionaire, right? It's like, wow, this is amazing. So I think for me right now, that is the work, including the resistance to think of money as something so important. Because before I was just like, no, money's not important. This is what's important. Now I'm like, no, if it's the means through which in the world right now, in our current society, that's the currency that we use to make things happen, right? Like, it's not the most important, but it is quite an important energy. And if we're not at peace with it, then we might as well, like, continue to live small in that way. So for me, it's that shift of paradigm right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking of the way this applies to health as well. If you're already healthy, you probably don't think about it in the sense of worrying about it, but you do think about it of intentionally maintaining your health.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true of money, is that when you have a lot of it, you're not going to think about it of like, how do I pay my rent? But you will think of it. And think about investments, think about like a relationship, right? Like how we were talking about. To have a good relationship with someone, you do need to invest energy and time and attention. So when I think about improving my wealth, I think about how can I devote more time to it. Masterminding, ideation. This is a technique everyone can use, is every day start with writing down 10 ideas of how you can invite more money into your life. What could you create and put out into the marketplace? And the idea is not to get the most epic idea right away. It's to train your idea muscle, because that muscle for many people is atrophied. We're not in the habit of brainstorming every morning 10 or 20 ideas of how to make more money, how to improve business, how to improve our mental mastery, our spiritual path. And when you start creating ideas every morning, now your brain becomes more awake to looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, I've been doing that because that was homework you gave me. And it's very interesting because the first few days, it's really hard to get past 5. And then the next few days, you repeat the same ones. And you have to also be okay with repeating. And then one comes up and you're like, oh, that's new. I don't know that I will do it, but it's interesting to...
It's an idea.
It's an idea, right?
It might bring in something interesting.
Exactly. And also just like to me, what that exercise has been so interesting because I am now allowing myself to just like have crazy ideas, and even ones that I'm not even gonna follow through with. However, it is giving my mind the openness to be like, well, if you want the choices, there are choices.
Exactly.
You don't have to take them, but there are choices.
Exactly.
Which is a change of perspective. When you're like, oh no, I'm so limited. You're not. You're just choosing not to take that choice, and you're okay if you don't want to take it, but there are choices.
One lesson I've been learning repeatedly this year is when you have two choices and neither one is ideal, it means there's a third choice that you're blind to. And there was a specific moment where I had two choices, didn't like either of them, took some mushrooms, and a third choice became available.
There we go.
In the span of a couple hours. It was always there. It was sitting right in front of me, but my ego literally couldn't see it until I removed a few layers.
So maybe we should all add like third choice always, mushrooms.
Always a third choice. Yes. Yvonne, it's been such a great conversation.
Same. Thank you for having me.
Is there anything we haven't touched on, anything you'd like to impart as final words of wisdom to the listener?
Appreciation, I think, if anything gets taken away from conversation, is just like appreciate whatever's happening in your life right now, because that is potentially the next lesson that you're going to be building on. Like whatever is going on right now, there's so much value to it. And it will take you to the next level. So just use it.
I feel that. I'm visiting Vancouver now where we're doing this podcast, and I used to live here before, and coming back here for a visit, I sense my appreciation for things that maybe I took for granted when I lived here.
Right.
And now I'm here and I'm seeing it with fresh eyes. And so the question I want to leave with everyone is, are you appreciating the most out of this current moment? Wherever you are and whatever your circumstances are, there are things right now in your life that are beautiful, bringing you joy, bringing you love, bringing you bliss, that you may not be fully appreciating. And there's such depths you can go to when you allow yourself to feel that joy, feel the sunset, feel the warm cup of coffee that you're drinking in the morning. Because it's a cliche, but it's the little things, not the big things.
It is the little things.
When you look back.
Amazing. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. You've been listening to the James Xander Trip. Thank you for being a listener of the podcast. Go subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider checking out Unlock God Mode at unlockgodmode.org. That's where you'll also find the details about our community. And we'll have links in the show notes if you want to connect with Yvonne.
Yeah. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.